This New South Wales History Week is themed around marking time, which led me to consider significant events that we mark across the course of our lives. And this in turn led me to think about retirement, which is something that I must admit I hadn't really done very much of before. I expect that I'm not alone in avoiding thinking about this subject. Retirement is a milestone that's some distance over the horizon, and when I arrive there, I'm going to be old. And I don't want to think about being old. And what's more, retirement is kind of boring. The word conjures images of golf and bowling and superannuation and daytime TV, and I don't find any of that particularly appealing, with the exception of daytime TV. But as I began exploring retirement through the collection of the National Archives, I began to realise that retirement is, in fact, a fascinating lens through which we can examine Australia's people and history. So let's begin with some broad strokes. Retirement is a major life event for most of us. Even if you're not part of the wage-earning workforce, you might be a homemaker, retirement will still probably impact you in some way through a spouse or family member. But retirement is a relatively new idea. Our understanding of it as a period beyond a person's active working life was cemented in the 20th century when improved health outcomes gave us longer life expectancies so that we might live beyond our time in the workforce. Before the 20th century, a gentleman of means might retire to a drawing room for cigars at the end of a meal. But one was more likely to retire to an early grave directly from a life of grinding toil, with the average life expectancy of a newborn in 1901 just 32 years old. But the rising lines in the graph you can see here show how life expectancy has effectively doubled over the course of the past century. So retirement is then a relatively new concept. But the National Archives is a relatively new National Archive. Our collection is primarily based on records produced by the Commonwealth Government, which was formed with the Federation of Australia in 1901. So we are in a good position to look at this modern phenomenon. The photograph that you're looking at now is, however, an exception in that it's a pre-Federation depiction of retirement. The photo dates from 1896 and marks the retirement of Gladesville postmistress, Mrs. Sarah Howell. This is among our earliest records of retirement. Our collection includes pre-Federation post office material because the various colonial mail systems of different states and territories were merged into the Postmaster General, or PMG, department after Federation, while maintaining a continuity with their pre-Federation history. So many pre-Federation records have since been consigned to the National Archives, including this wonderful photo, which shows Mrs. Howell, and I think that's perhaps her with the frilly sleeves next to the chap with the mutton chop whiskers and top hat there. And she's gathered with her post office colleagues for what may be an early example of that great Australian ritual of retirement, the retirement party. And we'll get back to parties later, but I want to first look at the working life of a woman in the late 19th century. We learn from other Gladesville post office records that Mrs. Sarah Howell occupied this role for, sorry, I'm getting a few messages about the sound. Does it seem okay?
It's all fine.
Yep. All right.
Yeah.
Yes, Sarah Howell occupied this role for 25 years, with her husband applying for the position on her behalf in this letter to the Postmaster General of New South Wales, dating from the 3rd of March, 1871. And he writes, I must respectfully beg to apply for the office of postmistress on behalf of my wife, Sarah Howell. And he goes on to provide references for securities, character, and competence in the names of a local carpenter and farmer. So this was a woman occupying a position of workplace authority prior to female suffrage in Australia, but her appointment to the role was dependent on the intervention of her husband and the approval of several men. Now, another aspect of retirement is renewal and the possibility of someone else, likely someone younger, moving into the role vacated by the retiree. And so it is that Mrs. Sarah Howell was succeeded as postmistress of Gladesville by none other than Miss Sarah Howell, her daughter, as we can see in this document from 1896. And the typewritten text reads, "Copy of the approval of the Postmaster General sanctioning the appointment of Miss S. Howell, junior operator, to the position of Post and Telegraph Mistress." So returning to that retirement photo, we can speculate that Miss Howell may be the woman dressed in white with the wide-brimmed hat, just right of centre. These records give us an insight into a comfortable middle-class life that was not enjoyed by all pre-Federation Australians. At the turn of the century, the elderly or infirm received no financial support from the state, and their care fell either to family or to religious and charitable institutions. Some of the colonies provided limited welfare support, often in the form of institutional care. This photograph from around 1896 comes from the collection of the State Archives of New South Wales at Museums of History New South Wales, and likely shows a dormitory building at the Rookwood Asylum for the infirm and destitute. And it doesn't look too bad from this distance, does it? But if you look closely, you can see that there are a lot of people crowded onto that veranda, and beds were in high demand in these places. Poverty was widespread following an economic depression in the 1890s, and Australia was asking itself how it could better support those who could not support themselves. The Warwick Examiner and Times, a regional Queensland newspaper, paints a vivid picture of destitute elderly on local streets in this report from the 5th of October 1908, which was accessed through the National Library of Australia's Trove resource. The scene was pathetic in many respects. The old bowed forms and grey heads, the slow hobble with the aid of sticks, were all reminders that fortune looks coldly on some while smiling on others, and that in life's battle some are sorely buffeted. It is, however, gratifying to know that those who have grown old and often helpless in the industrial service of their country will be able to pass their declining days in a fair amount of comfort. It's notable that the writer confers dignity on these unfortunate souls who are victims of misfortune rather than victims of their own laziness, and they're given respect for their industrial service to Australia. And the hopeful conclusion to that paragraph is due to the passage of the Invalid and Old Age Pensions Act by the newly formed Commonwealth Government in 1908. And there it is. This was groundbreaking social welfare legislation, and it reflects a progressive attitude to social and political rights running through the policies generated by the newly federated Australian government. In addition to state pensions, their legislation included compulsory primary schooling and the extension of universal voting rights to women, while the emergence of a strong labour movement pushed the country towards shorter working hours and better pay and conditions. The Invalid and Old Age Pensions Act, which you can see here, is housed in the NAA's national office in Canberra, and a digital copy can be viewed by anyone with internet access through our publicly available record search database. So Let's take a look inside. So Clause 15 of this Act states that every person who's attained the age of 65 years or who, being permanently incapacitated for work, has attained the age of 60 years shall be qualified to receive an old age pension. As a public servant, it's inappropriate for me to make political comment, but I'm going to put my neck on the line and say that this is a good thing. It's really good to have pensions provided by the state. But any progressive ideals are undermined when we look at those from whom pension rights are withheld in the following Clause 16. So Clause 16 reads, the following persons shall not be qualified to receive an old age pension. Clause 16.1a is aliens, so that's foreign people who are not naturalized citizens. B is people who've only just been naturalized, so that's not too controversial. But then we get to Clause C, Asiatics or Aboriginal natives of Australia, Africa, Pacific Islands, or New Zealand. And in case you're in any doubt, this explicitly withholds the pension from people of specific racial backgrounds. That term Asiatic doesn't mean citizens of Asian countries. It doesn't mean a white person born in Singapore, for instance. It means humans of Asian racial heritage, alongside people of Aboriginal Australian, African, Pacific Island, or Maori ethnicity. So this legislation then takes a step forwards in the provision of pensions, but that step comes down upon non-white ethnic groups and condemns them and potentially their entire families to destitution in their old age. So we can see this document as a white Australia policy. So moving on through the Act, Clause 17 also removes the pension from people who are not of good character. Good character is a provision that we see in official documents in other areas, such as immigration, where entitlements or approvals can be withheld based on judgments of character, subjective discretionary judgments that may be founded on discrimination or hearsay. So we may have a pension applicant who's judged to be of bad character, but we know nothing about the character of the bureaucrat who's making that decision. But let's jump forward a few years to 1939 and the ABC, or Australian Broadcasting Commission, as it was then known. Let's see how retirement is covered by this staff rules document. So hopefully good old Auntie is a little friendlier to vulnerable groups. Well, not quite. Clause 43.2 reads, every female officer shall be deemed to have retired from the Commission's service on her marriage. So marriage equals retirement for women at the ABC in 1939. And this would have certainly also been true with other Australian employers at the time. But we're not, of course, dealing with retirement to a life of leisure. The married woman is expected to retire to the new role of looking after her man and subsequently their family, whether she likes it or not. And this sits alongside a clause stating that no married woman shall be eligible for employment apart from in special cases. In 1939, there was a very significant special case just around the corner in the form of World War II, and the ensuing labour shortage may have seen discriminatory employment policies of this nature at least temporarily withdrawn, albeit out of necessity rather than principle. So I don't know about you, but I need a wee bit of cheering up now. So let's take a look at our cover star, Hilda Carey. She is notably described as Miss Hilda Carey, implying that her career was not sacrificed for marriage. This wonderful picture shows her in 1967 upon her retirement from the role of Director of New South Wales Bureau of International Correspondence for Schools with the United Nations. And she's surrounded here by her younger colleagues. We've limited information about this picture, but I like to imagine that they're reading messages from well-wishers at Miss Carey's retirement do. Now, that photo was from series A1200, which is comprised of almost 90,000 black and white photographs taken for the Federal Department of Information between 1945 and 1971. These cover a diverse range of subjects, and we've similar series from government departments before and after these dates. Here are some more photos in that series showing our Church of England retirement village in Castle Hill, Sydney, and these were taken around 1970. These images are part of a photographic collection that you can access online by going to our homepage, naa.gov.au, and clicking on the record search button, which you can see highlighted in yellow here. And that will take you to the front page of our record search database, where you can see the photo search tab highlighted. Most of what I'm presenting today are digitized items available through record search, and anyone with internet access can access these. It's a brilliant resource, whether you're focused on a specific research topic or just idly searching for terms of interest. So I do encourage you to make use of it. Now, I use the word series, and before we return to retirement, I'll briefly explain that term and how it applies to the National Archives. So a series is essentially how we group together a common unit of records. It's usually created or accumulated by a single agency or person. The diagram here represents our archival structure, which is the Commonwealth Record Series system. And you can see the sort of pyramidal hierarchy represented by that grey triangle. At the bottom of that, we have items, over 45 million individual items. The Invalid and Old Age Pensions Act 1908 is an example of an item. And moving up that triangle, those items belong to series. And in the case of the Pensions Act, that's the series number A1559, or Assent Copies of Acts of Parliament. And that in turn was created by an agency. And here that is the Attorney General's Department, which belongs to an organisation, and that is the Commonwealth of Australia. All right, so let's get back to Miss Hilda Carey and her retirement party. So the retirement party is the ceremony in which we celebrate the point of transition between a life of graft and a life of recreation. Perhaps it's a fond farewell to beloved colleagues and friends. Perhaps it's a final work obligation, one last hurdle before you can turn your back forever on those beloved colleagues and friends. The National Archives holds many photos of retirement parties, mainly showing public servants at the end of their careers. A common feature of many of these photos is alcohol. We see beer. We see beer in jugs. We see beer in glasses. We see quite a lot of beer in glasses. And of course, we see beer in bottles. I must have a sixth sense because I can see spirits. And take a look at these fancy people with their champagne. And of course, you can't have a party without a cake. We see big cakes. There's another. And we see small cakes. Good luck, Jack. And the retirement party also sees the presentation of retirement gifts. Timepieces are a tradition at these events, and they apparently signify that time has ended for one journey and that another journey is about to begin. And they're also pretty handy for making sure you're in front of the telly at 4:30 for letters and numbers. Other gifts might represent achievements in one's career. It's a bit of a tradition in archives to gift a retiring colleague with a framed copy of a collection item, although that's not what we're seeing here. This is a chap called Joe W. Johnston being presented with a framed photo upon his retirement from Communications House in 1987. Other gifts reflect pastimes that we might associate with retirement, like fishing or bowling. Luggage is another gift we see bestowed upon the retiree. How about some pens or a lovely picnic hamper? But what I love about these photos are the personalities that shine through. I'm sure I'm not alone when I say that I can't look at a photo like this without smiling. That guy, Selwyn, he's absolutely amazing. It's wonderful to see colleagues enjoying each other's company in these pictures, which are a reminder that work may be about things like achievement and ambition, and maybe just getting by financially, but work is also about people. Relationships, friendship, you might want to call that mateship. This is a big part of our experience of the workplace. And our experience of the workplace is a big part of our experience of life. Perhaps it's when someone's leaving that we get the strongest sense of those connections. Now, there's a saying that athletes die twice. And I think maybe that's a saying that's better known in the UK, because I've been getting a lot of blank faces when I've spoken it in Australia. But anyway, athletes die twice. That means they undergo a figurative death upon their retirement, then a less figurative death upon their actual demise. So similarly, news reporters describe a story reporting a politician's retirement as their political obituary. And these grim turns of phrase equate retirement from public life with the end of life itself. But the National Archives collection gives us many examples of people embarking on fruitful second careers, following careers in sport. So instead of saying athletes die twice, it's more accurate. And it's a lot nicer, I think, to say they retire twice. You are looking at Dixie Willis, pictured here in 1962. And Dixie was a middle distance runner who represented Australia in the 1960 Olympics and 1962 Commonwealth Games. She set world records, for the 800 meters and 880 yards. And this is Dixie at home in Ermington, New South Wales, with her dog Boxer. Illness put Dixie out of competition in the 1964 Olympic Games in Tokyo, at which point she retired from competition. Dixie remained in a sports-adjacent career after retiring from athletics, working as a receptionist at a squash club. A sports personality with a higher profile post-competition career was Richie Benaud. Benaud was born in Penrith in Western Sydney and attended Parramatta High School. So speaking from Chester Hill on Darug country, we can claim him as a local lad. Even someone as ignorant of cricket as myself is aware of Richie Benaud. This photo is again from the A1200 series, and it shows Benno in 1959 when he was Australia's Test captain. He became the first player to reach 200 wickets and 2,000 runs in Test cricket, and he reached that milestone in 1963 and retired from playing in 1964. I've some footage of Benno's final match lined up to show you, but first I just want to give a little word about our audiovisual or AV collection. The National Archives preserves a massive collection of AV material with over 1.5 million TV, radio and film items on digital and analogue media. The vast majority of these are housed in stable archival storage here in our Chester Hill repositories. Around 70% of this AV collection comes from our national public service broadcaster, the ABC, with the rest coming from sources including SBS, Film Australia, the military, and other government organisations. These pictures of Richie Benno's final Test match were shot for ABC television. He's bowling against the tourists South Africa at the SCG. And I'm going to continue to talk while this plays because the film has no sound. It is mute. It was shot on 16mm black and white film, and it would have had a separate sound element when it was broadcast as part of the ABC's Weekend magazine programme. I haven't been able to locate any sound for this presentation, but it might exist somewhere. So the date we have in this is the 16th of February, 1964, which is the Sunday that the Weekend magazine was broadcast. But I believe that the recording dates from 11th of February, a Tuesday, when Benno played his final innings. As with most jobs, the cricketer's retirement is usually planned. It's announced in advance, and the crowd here at the SCG knows that this is his final Test match as captain. So you can see younger spectators rushing to congratulate him on his career. If this clip had sound, we'd be hearing the polite applause as he walks from the pitch for the final time, surrounded by grateful fans. Off he goes to his next career. So after his retirement from competition, Benno went on to become one of the sport's most highly regarded commentators, working until 2013. Unfortunately for us, his commentary work was mainly for commercial stations, and I haven't located any examples to include in this presentation. The National Archives, you see, doesn't collect from commercial channels, with only public service broadcasters coming under our bailiwick. So, sticking with cricket, this is former England fast bowler Peter Loader with his family in a photo from series A12111. And that's again a government series, but this time it originates with the Department of Immigration. Loader settled in Australia upon his retirement from playing and worked as an umpire in WA. And this is another English sportsman who migrated to Australia upon retirement. It's the rugby league footballer John Large, who became a masseur after retiring from the game. And this again originates from the Department of Immigration, which encouraged migration and indeed retirement from the UK. Now, one might argue that Australia relates to Britain as Florida relates to the USA. It's a welcoming location to retire in a warm, beautiful setting among a large community of peers. Now, I've had some issues with this video clip. Let's see if it plays. Before I try, it's a brief excerpt from an ABC Four Corners episode from 1976. and it shows the growth of the Sunshine Coast as a retirement destination. This clip, I'm gonna, like, if I can actually play it, I'm going to keep it short because it includes a song about Surfer's Paradise, sung in a style reminiscent of Vera Lynn. It's a horrible earworm that's been living in my head for about 2 weeks now, and I'll try and spare you that, but let's see if it plays. I don't think it's gonna. Yes. Okay, so how about we work around? I'm going to try and just share another screen that I've got the video ready to roll. Do you see that, Attimus? Great. Okay. Keep that mercifully short. Oh, no sound. Oh, okay. So I'll try one more time. See if we get sound this time. Okay. You got it, Attimus? Is it visible?
Is it not moving?
Yep. So Attimus here's got sound.
We are hosting 500 senior citizens from Brisbane and surrounding districts. It will.
I don't know if you want sound. All right, let's get back to the PowerPoint. Here we go. I'm going to have to do this again in just a moment with my next clip. So just waiting for PowerPoint to reload. Please reload.
Sure.
Yep, there we go. And resume. Right. So you could kind of get the Britishness of the scenario there. Let's see if the next one works. I don't think it's gonna, but whoops. So the next clip is Sir Bruce Small. He was born in Ryde, New South Wales, but in 1976, when this was shot, he was a property developer and an MP in the Queensland Legislative Assembly. I mentioned Florida, and it was to Florida that Small looked for inspiration as he developed canals and retirement communities around the Gold Coast. So once again, I'm going to have to drop this in from another screen because, yeah, all right, bear with me again, folks. Check I've got the right 951. It's this one. You got it? Okay.
Older than themselves, still on top.
I think this is a great day. Great day for the Irish, great day for the Scotch, great day for the Welsh, and a great day for everybody. It's a lovely day for the Gold Coast. It's really something that makes us proud when we're honoured with a visit from so distinguished an audience of beautiful girls and boys. I even put my jewelry on.
These people, by their huge numbers, make the Gold Coast Australia's oldest community. But they don't exactly line the seafront with wheelchairs, and there are no special American-style villages to contain them. No sunshine homes for geriatrics. The coast does have Australia's highest concentration of bowling clubs and the highest concentration of doctors to look after the old bowlers and the remaining army of senior citizens. It's said that doctors have no difficulty in earning $600 a day here. There are many who have difficulty paying the doctor's bills, just as there are many old people who find it hard to meet the Gold Coast rents.
Not so good. It's
Okay, let's go back to PowerPoint again. Sorry about the disruption here. All right. So after seeing that footage of bowling, here's a pension-age golfer just to complete the set of retirement cliches. The voiceover in that clip spoke about retirees as financially vulnerable, struggling to pay rent or doctor's bills. Now, it's a different narrative today, where the elderly are often characterised as extracting wealth from younger generations. Like many tenants, my rent is supporting the retirement lifestyle of my older landlords. And if my landlord's watching, I want to assure them that it's like an honour and privilege to continue doing so. It's a delight. So with circumstances like my own fairly widespread, we may be in a golden age of retirement right now. But is that sustainable? And perhaps in a few decades, when people like myself retire, we'll return to a situation where retirees are once again living on the edge. So many of us will set our retirement underway by writing a letter or email of resignation to our boss. But imagine if your boss was the Queen. That was the situation faced by Governor General John Kerr in 1977. And we've a copy of his letter of resignation here. So I'll translate his handwriting. He writes, "Your Majesty, with my humble duty, and for the reasons I indicated to you in our recent conversations, I humbly beg to be relieved of my appointment as Governor-General of Australia. If it pleases your Majesty, I'm prepared to continue in this office until arrangements are completed to swear in my successor. I have the honour to be, Madam, your Majesty's most humble and obedient servant, John Kerr." So that document is among what's known as the Palace Letters. And it's followed by this reply from the Queen's Secretary, Martin Charteris, which states in the second paragraph that the Queen fully understands and respects your reasons for tendering your resignation. So this is fairly standard correspondence. But more affecting is a related record comprising dozens of pages of rambling, handwritten drafts of Kerr's resignation letter, which the historian Jenny Hawking describes as a raw display of devastation, telling a poignant story of personal decline. These letters, she writes, provide a snapshot of the distressed end of Kerr's term as Governor-General, of his deteriorating relationship with the palace, and of his dramatic turn against Malcolm Fraser, as those who had encouraged and cajoled him in the months before the dismissal began to move against him. Now for a musical interlude. Play. You're about to see someone who was very famous in her lifetime, both in Australia and overseas, but who chose to live and ultimately retire here. The voiceover in this clip announces her name in about 10 seconds, and I'll be very impressed if anyone can smash her name into the chat before it's spoken, if they recognise her. Yes, it's playing. You got sound? Oh, I'm sorry.
Two.
I just crashed it.
Any friend?
Oh, really? We got it. It's going to end there.
Any friend? Hello.
Who is it?
Two. Yes.
Yeah, I believe Sue got her name there, so congratulations, Sue. Because that was the remarkable Winifred Atwell performing for charity in a Sydney Children's Hospital in 1959. She was born in Trinidad and studied at the Royal Academy of Music in London. And she then became a household name through performances on stage, television, and radio from the mid 1940s. And 70 years ago, in 1954, her song Let's Have Another Party, which you might guess followed on from Let's Have a Party, was the first piano instrumental to hit the #1 spot in the UK. And that was a Christmas #1, no less. And she remains the only woman to top the singles chart with an instrumental song. She began coming to Australia in 1955, and we hold the passenger list from the ship Stratheden, which shows her travelling under her married name, Winifred Levison, alongside her husband Reginald, who was also a performer and better known as Lou Levison. This visit was the first of many and led to Winifred's love of this country, which culminated in her retirement here. And she's buried alongside Lou in South Gundarimba, up near Lismore in the Northern Rivers. Now, you've probably filled out a passenger card on an international flight. You know, those annoying wee cards that have you scrabbling through your bags to find your travel information, and then you're bumping elbows and with your neighbours and trying to find space on the seatback table with this annoying little thing that you probably never ever think about again. Well, the National Archives has got them. And here's Winifred Atwell's as she leaves Australia for Honolulu after her 1955 concerts. And here she is in 1975 in an excerpt from the ABC's This Day Tonight programme. She's interviewed at home in Narrabeen, not Sydney, but Narrabeen. So let's hear what she has to say. I think we're on schedule. I should have got this at the start. Yeah. As you might infer from that interview, Winifred Atwell was a thoughtful and politically engaged person. What we're looking at here are letters between Prime Minister Gough Whitlam and Winifred Atwell that were consigned to the National Archives as part of Whitlam's personal papers. Her letter begins, "Dear Mr. Whitlam, please accept our sincere congratulations on the resounding win of the ALP last Saturday," and concludes, "Our fondest love and best wishes always, very sincerely, Lou and Winnie." And Whitlam replies, "Dear Lou, and many, many thanks for your generous letters of congratulations and good wishes. Margaret and I send you all good wishes in this new year." Winifred Atwell announced her retirement on the Mike Walsh Show in 1981. Excerpts from that interview and her farewell performance can be viewed on the website of the National Film and Sound Archive, the NFSA. She became a naturalised Australian citizen on the year she retired, 1981, excuse me. But sadly, she died just 2 years later. One of the wonderful things about retirement is that by the time it happens, a person really knows themselves. The retiree has lived with their dreams and passions and perhaps seen them sidelined for years due to the pressures of work. But retirement brings the opportunity to indulge passions and realise dreams. So here, for example, is one Dr. Lever, who is dedicating his retirement to the study of Welsh literature. He is pictured in his study in 1965 with the 13th century Welsh text, Historia Bawn o Hamtwyn, and apologies to any Welsh speakers in attendance. The retirement dream of shearer Colin Pike is a little different. He retired in 1955 to a poultry farm on the north central coast of New South Wales. He had purchased the farm from money saved from 44 years of work in Australia's shearing sheds. Or one could get involved in a bit of political activism, like these pensioners outside Parliament House in 1973. Now this is Franklin Arriketa from Papua New Guinea, pictured in 1958 in today's only featured photograph taken outside Australian borders. According to the description for this photograph, Mr. Araqueta devised a solution to the problem of getting the best out of retirement. Having completed 28 years of service as a clerk in the customs department, he found that too much leisure was irksome, which I can't relate to. So he secured himself another position as clerk at Sariba Slipway near his hometown district of Samurai. So Mr. Araqueta is not ashamed to shun retirement convention and continue doing what he loves, clerk work. But what I really love about this picture is the man's sense of style. I'm sure you agree that he looks absolutely terrific. So bravo, Franklin Araqueta, for doing what you love and looking tip-top while you do it. No comment on the sartorial choices on display in this photo from 1968, which shows a different approach to retirement, sitting in a park and whiling the days away. Now, if you look in the background, you can see a mobile street concert with a singer accompanied by a pianist played out through loudspeakers atop the van in which their equipment was transported, which seems absolutely wonderful. And I'd love to see something like this again, but one of the old fellows has got his head in his hands there. Could they be playing the song about Surfer's Paradise? But if you really want to spend your retirement in style, spend it doing archive research. Visit naa.gov.au and you might solve some family history mysteries or learn about an ancestor's wartime service. Try searching for your hobbies, for the sports or pastimes that you love, and see what you find. I reckon that the National Archives holds something of significance for every Australian. There might be some wrong turns, some dead ends, or some frustrations along the way to finding it, but that will make its discovery all the more satisfying. And if you get really stuck, you can ask us about the collection through our website. And you can sort of get a little impression of how to do so there. So it has been my absolute delight to research the subject of retirement and present this to you on this New South Wales History Week. I've been confronted by the stark language of white Australia policies and troubled by John Kerr's letters. I've been charmed by Winifred Atwell and some faces from the past. And I've got a terrible song about Surfer's Paradise stuck in my head. But more than anything else, I've been enlightened and I no longer consider retirement to be boring.